The Food Reserve Agency is a government institution that is mandated generally to manage national strategic food reserves as provided under Section 5 of the Food Reserve Act number 6 of 2020 of the laws of Zambia. Additionally, the agency is also mandated to market and trade designated agricultural commodities. Further, the agency is also mandated to purchase, import, sell, trade, or export agricultural designated commodities. So designated commodities, these are terminologies that may sound technical. So these, in simple terms, are selected agricultural commodities that the agency is required to trade, market, and import as prescribed in the Food Reserve Act number 6 of 2020 of the laws of Zambia. So apart from carrying out these functions explained earlier, the agency also is required to establish, manage, and maintain storage facilities as well as equipment that is used during the marketing or trading of these agricultural commodities. So the storage facilities that we are talking about here are the sheds, the silos, as well as any other spaces where the agency stores the commodities that it purchases from farmers. So these are the storage facilities that we are required by law to manage, as well as ensure that they are in good condition on a continuous basis. So the equipment component of the law requires the agency to have specific equipment in place that is used, one, to monitor the moisture content of the commodities that we buy. So these commodities, as you may be aware, are commodities like grade A white maize, paddy rice, and soybeans that we have been buying on a yearly basis from farmers. So there are a list of equipment that we are required to put in place and use as we carry out our programs. So for example, when it comes to assessing the moisture content of maize, every year before the marketing season kicks in, the agency will do some monitoring activities countrywide to assess whether the moisture content of maize is at the required level before the agency can go out in the fields through satellite depots and start buying the crop. So for example, the equipment that we use to assess the moisture content of maize is what we call a moisture meter. So using that gadget, we'll be able to tell how maize is progressing in terms of becoming dry. And when it reaches 12.5, then the agency knows that we can now buy maize at that level and store for long-term use. Apart from just using the moisture content, the agency is also required to buy and have in place what we call platform scales. These are scales that we use out in the fields, out in the satellite depots, to weigh the maize that we buy from the market before we actually have the same maize put in the National Strategic Food Reserves. So the agency buys maize at 50 kilograms per bag, and that is what we usually pay for. So in terms of us knowing that we have bought the required weight, we use the platform scales, which are again by law required to be assessed every year before the onset of the marketing season. The agency ensures that it abides by the Zambia Meteorology Agency law and ensures that the scales are assessed. In simple terms, they are reviewed for the Zambia Meteorological Agency to confirm that our scales are accurate, after which a stamp of approval is put on the scale, just to confirm, to the general public that our scales have been assessed and confirmed to be accurate. So once that is done, that is when now the agency will go out in the field and start using the scales to ensure that, one, we buy the accurate weight of maize, paddy rice and soybeans from the farmers. In doing that, we also contribute in giving back to the farmers value for their crops. We don't get anything more to what we buy, and we don't get anything less to what is required. So our scales are accurate, and when we say we've bought a 50 kilogram bag of maize, it actually means that we have bought nothing less but exactly 50 kilogram bag of maize. Then the last function that we are required to carry out as an agency is to also collect information relating to the designated agricultural commodities that we are talking about here. So we collect market information on how the commodities are faring on the market, after which we also reasonably try to price our crop marketing season prices every year. So that is done on an annual basis as well. Then lastly, we are also required by law to advise the Minister of Agriculture on matters surrounding or relating to the National Strategic Food Reserves.
My name is Charity Lubingo, the Standards and Quality Coordinator, in charge of the Standards and Quality Unity. The main function of this unity is to look at the management of the quality of the stocks which FRIA keeps in its reserve. The process begins at the buying point, where the maize is first screened to check that it meets the required specification. And by this I mean that we are mandated to buy grade A maize, which is free from weevils or any pests and free from any foreign matter. For us to achieve that, the maize is passed through a screen where it is screened to check whether there is anything which is foreign apart from the white maize. After we purchase that maize, it is bagged into a 50 kg bag, meaning the farmer will come with their own farmer bag, and then the maize is going to be passed through a screen. Once it's screened, the maize which is acceptable will be poured into the FRIA bag and measured using the scale. It will be correctly measured at 50 kg per bag. Once this bag is measured, the maize is collected, bulked at the collection point where we'll buy it from the rural areas. When we have enough volumes bought, 600 plus bags, we start transporting this maize to the main storage facilities. And at this point, we have to ensure that the maize is properly kept to prevent it from any possible losses as a result of pest infestation or any other unacceptable environmental factors which would further deteriorate the maize. So by that is we have to prepare our storage facilities by thoroughly cleaning them, removing all mats which could be harboring any possible pests. Having done that, the maize is further treated by conducting fumigation so that we clear any possible pests which would have come with the material, which would have come with the maize. Fumigation is simply a gaseous pest control which is put in the maize in an airtight environment so that it can circulate in that environment to kill all the pests which would have come with the maize or may have hatched. Remember, in post-harvest management, pest infestation begins right in the field before the farmer harvests. Once the farmer harvests, even if we pass through that maize on a screen, We could not have done 100% because it would have come at the stage of eggs, which we cannot see with our visual eyes. But as we keep the maize, we'll start noticing pests coming out like weevils or so. So it is because of that once we collect the maize and we have kept and it has been stacked and met the quantities which we require, we now need to undergo fumigation to kill all possible pests which could have come alongside. Other than the fumigation, we also conduct another activity called the residue control. This is simply the use of a contact pesticide, which kills pests which could fly on top of the bags. And this will help other foreign pests not to go into the bag. This activity is done on a weekly basis. Having mentioned that, we get back to the time when we receive the maize. The time when we receive maize, we receive it. Before we actually receive it, we train our people who are assigned in the various satellite depots so that they could assess the maize before they buy it. So before they do that, they need to understand what quality of maize which they need to buy. And we'll explain to them that they are expected to buy good white maize which looks like this, which is free from any foreign matter, free from any diseased grain, free from any pests. So this is the actual white maize which is recommended for our farmers to buy. So once we buy that, we undergo that process of protecting the maize so that we can keep this maize for a long period of time. These reserves are expected to keep this grain for a long period of time, which may reach up to 5 years. And this is why we carry out all these particular activities like fumigation and the residual control.
In conclusion, the functions of the Food Reserve Agency can be summarized in the following ways. One is basically to manage the national strategic food reserves for the country. And then secondly, to market, trade, import and export agricultural designated commodities. And then thirdly, we are also required to collect information surrounding the designated agricultural commodities, as well as advising the Minister of Agriculture on matters of national strategic food reserves. So these are specific and straightforward functions of the Food Reserve Agency. And mind you, the agency is a government institution that operates under a government law. And that law is the Food Reserve Act number 6 of 2020. So whatever we do as an institution is derived from this law. And we have actually been hearing members of the public thinking that the agency is also mandated to issue agricultural inputs like fertilizer and seed, etc. That is a whole different and separate mandate which falls under a different government institution, which falls under our mother ministry of agriculture. The agency is purely mandated to carry out functions surrounding national strategic food reserves. So the agency, as at now, is required to only carry out the explained functions as prescribed in the Food Reserve Act number 6 of 2020.